And I had to come up with characters that were no longer stereotypes. In other words, I couldn't depend on gangsters. I had to get something new.
When Jack brought the drawings into me, there was some nut on a flying surfboard. Some looked like a naked guy on a flying surfboard. I said, "Who's that?" And Jack said, "Well, I figured somebody as powerful as you want Galactus to be, he should have a herald who flies ahead of him to find the planets."
I certainly couldn't treat him in the same way that I would any ordinary mortal. And I remember in my first story, I had to back away from him to resolve that story. And of course, the Silver Surfer is the fallen angel.
Jack only thought of him as a herald. You know, we'd use him once or twice and let him go.
And they were figures that had never before been used in comics. They were above mythic figures. And of course, they were the first gods.
That looked so noble and so heroic and almost tragic. I fell in love with them.
The Silver Surfer is a character created by writer-artist Jack Kirby and scripted by writer-editor Stan Lee in the pages of Fantastic Four number 48 from December 1965, cover dated March 1966. I say scripted by Lee because it's been revealed that Kirby came up with this random surfing figure before presenting the finished pages to Lee. Sometimes Kirby and Lee would have their story meetings where Lee would give Kirby a plot, and Kirby would expand it into a full comic. Their Marvel method style of co-writing. Inker Joe Sinnott wasn't part of the plotting, but he's an irreplaceable part of FF's look during this time. While the character debuted during a pivotal creative burst during their FF collaboration, the Surfer wasn't supposed to be as big a character as he ultimately became. Silver Surfer has two origins, Kirby's version and Lee's version. Originally, during the story called the Galactus Trilogy, there was no Norrin Radd or Zenn-La. Kirby's version of the Surfer was a being of cosmic energy given form by Galactus. Kirby's Surfer would learn how to become more human by interacting with the blind sculptress Alicia Masters. Luckily, the original pencils exist, so it's possible to see the margin notes versus the dialogue in the final comic. So Kirby's version is a being of cosmic energy that learned to be human and defied Galactus. Lee was instantly enamored with the character and ended up retooling him in the late 60s. By that time, Kirby was already frustrated at not getting the control and credit for his work that he deserved. Lee starting a new Silver Surfer series in 1968 with artist John Buscema was more salt in the wound. Not only that, but Lee changed the entire origin, introducing Norrin Radd, Shalla-Bal, with Galactus taking on a new herald in exchange for sparing the planet Zenn-La. Norrin Radd's name is on the same level as Blackagar Boltagon. It is true that a lot of what we know about the Silver Surfer is based on the Lee characterization. Kirby only drew the final issue of that series near the end of his time at Marvel. It had the Surfer fighting the Inhumans and plotting revenge on Earth. It feels like Kirby hitting back at Marvel and Lee for taking that character from him. I've already talked about Kirby's departure and return to Marvel in other videos. Kirby left Marvel for DC Comics in 1970, but felt unsatisfied with his treatment there and returned to Marvel again in 1975. During this time, he was writing, drawing, and editing some crazy stories. Some books with characters he co-created like Black Panther and Captain America. Others included new concepts like the Eternals, Machine Man, and Devil Dinosaur. Kirby would not only return to the Silver Surfer, he would reunite with his FF collaborators Lee and Sinnott for a Surfer graphic novel. The book shows the Surfer's first encounter with Earth, which he initially sees as a suitable planet for Galactus. It doesn't even mention the rest of the Marvel Universe. The Surfer calls himself a passenger of death, but decides to plead with Galactus to spare humanity. This defiance causes a rift between the Surfer and Galactus, as the two fight in the middle of New York. The story does show the aftermath of the fight, showing that some people watching the fight on the ground suffered burns from the power cosmic. Like in the original story, Galactus banishes the Silver Surfer to Earth. The Surfer changes his appearance to blend in, which didn't happen in the original story. Galactus has a figure similar to Desaad from Kirby's Fourth World books called the Master of Guile. Guile just exists in Galactus's mind. He's the devil on the Planet Eater's shoulder. The Master of Guile suggests that Galactus use a woman with a familiar face to seduce the surfer back to his side. This golden woman has the power to control emotions. She tries to get the surfer to abandon humanity by showing him how terrible it can be. Despite this, the surfer still feels like Earth is worth saving. Ever the idealist. It's revealed that Ardina is a clone of Shalla-Bal created by Galactus. Even then, Ardina ends up joining the surfer to take on the Planet Eater. Galactus builds some energy machine that absorbs Ardina, leaving the surfer alone. In a quiet scene, the surfer tells Galactus that death is a better alternative than losing Ardina. Galactus makes the surfer a final offer, that he'll spare Earth if the surfer becomes his herald again. The surfer says that there was never a choice before he becomes the herald of Galactus once more. One big difference is how this story has zero references to the Marvel Universe. So, no Fantastic Four, Watcher, Alicia Masters, or even an Ultimate Nullifier. Even Lee stays away from selling or promoting other titles. This story is told as if the Silver Surfer and Galactus are Earth's first experience with the supernatural. It fits with a lot of Kirby's Marvel and DC stories in the 70s. His main characters, these extraordinary figures, would have supporting casts of normal people. The king wouldn't have his human characters be completely helpless. He gave them agency and opened them up to the crazy cosmic shit he would present in his stories. A lot of the story is the surfer learning how Earth operates. It's really grounded with random cutaways to Galactus consuming planets or wrestling with his internal demons. It's balancing the mundane here on Earth with the crazy cosmic events happening out there. Kirby is giving this book his all, and having Sinnott back for the ride makes the reunion pretty sweet. His inking work over Kirby's pencils is just as powerful as ever. The people working on this book were taking it seriously. Stan doesn't force humor or any promotion in the story. This doesn't feel like a Marvel product. It's a standalone story by Kirby and Lee. Ardina is a new character created solely for this story, created by Galactus as a way to bring the surfer back as his herald. Galactus refuses to vaporize the surfer because he's the best he is at what he does. Wait, that's another guy. Some people see him as a threat. To others, he starts becoming a celebrity. People build statues. Some people even try to kidnap him to put him on display. The ending itself feels pretty grim. The surfer, who pushed for freedom, once again sacrifices himself to become a herald to save a planet. Going back to Kirby's original interpretation of the surfer, he was supposed to be a being of energy, learning everything for the first time about being human once he meets Alicia Masters. Even in the 70s book, the first thing Kirby does is have the surfer materialize from the hand of Galactus. All of the Shalla-Bal and Zenn-La parts are from the origin Lee created in the run with John Buscema. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were corresponding regularly during this time through letters. Aside from one reprint in 1997, the book hasn't had a new printing. A reason why this book probably hasn't been reprinted is because it's copyrighted to Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So it's most likely something to do with paying royalties. It always is. On the back of the book, it says, quote, "Front painting by Earl Norrin from a sketch by Jack Kirby," unquote. It wasn't a damn sketch, Kirby did the cover. It was decided that the painted Norrin version would be the one used. Here's both of them for comparison. It's funny how during this era, Marvel would have Kirby do covers for books he didn't pencil. Now that he's doing this longer form work, someone else does the cover. According to Heritage Auctions, the original Kirby cover was inked by Mike Royer. Bruce Timm did a recreation later on as well. I do want to cover Norrin real quick. During his career, he painted covers for Conan, He-Man, and even some Marvel covers like Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. So none of this is a dig at Norrin, he was just hired to do a cover. During the mid to late 70s, Marvel had a deal with the Fireside Books arm of Simon & Schuster for paperback collections of older stories, with The Surfer being its first graphic novel. Or as Alan Moore puts it, big expensive comics. Norrin's cover just fits in with the rest of those Fireside Books, which all had painted covers. John Romita and Bob Larkin painted most of them, with Norrin doing Surfer's book. There are photos and biographies not only of Kirby and Lee, but the entire creative team at the end of the book. Inker Joe Sinnott, letterer John Costanza, and colorist Glynis Wein. Kirby's version of this story feels like his commentary on creative freedom, departing Marvel for DC but finding his freedom restricted again. only to go back to Marvel and end up feeling the same way. So it is bittersweet that the co-creators of the FF plus Sinnott reunited, all to do a book on a creation Kirby felt he lost control over. Clearly, Kirby wasn't pleased during his return to Marvel, nothing really changed, and he was again thrown under the bus, even though he was firing on all cylinders with the crazy ideas he was putting out at this time. All of this became the actual last straw that pushed him to leave mainstream comics for animation, where he was actually treated with respect. This book doesn't have a clean-cut happy ending, but neither did Kirby's time at Marvel. Kirby wouldn't be able to completely own the rights to certain creations until later in his career, but at least he got to that point even if it was late in the game. Apparently in 1976, a producer named Lee Kramer approached Marvel and Stan Lee to pitch a Silver Surfer rock opera movie. Kramer was a fan of the original FF comics. A limitation was that they couldn't use the Fantastic Four because of rights issues. It was pretty ambitious, seeing as Kramer wanted to, quote, make an epic picture on the scope of 2001: A Space Odyssey, unquote. Frank Zane, a 3-time Mr. Olympia winning bodybuilder, was cast as the Surfer, with Olivia Newton-John cast as Erdina. In 1980, Stan Lee even wrote a screenplay outline for a Silver Surfer movie. That same year, Kramer reached out to Paul McCartney asking him to produce music for the movie. Unfucking real. Based on letters, McCartney was interested, but financing for the movie didn't work out and the project was scrapped. Although, there are test images of Frank Zane as the Surfer, and Jack and Roz Kirby did meet Paul and Linda McCartney at a show in 1975 or 1976. Kirby and Lee were already talking about a possible Silver Surfer movie while working on their book in the 70s, and that's covered in some of their letters. Kirby even mentions a movie in his breakdowns. So pretty much the 1978 book is what the movie would have been like. For those who are new, welcome! The early Fantastic Four stories were some of the first comics I read, so they're why I have an addiction to this medium. I've been breaking them down by decade, so there's an entire playlist for those essays on my channel. As always, the transcript for this essay is on my website, witsandpod.com. If it's not on there, it's not the real deal. Share these essays around. Thanks for watching my work. Chaos ensues. Up next, for real this time, the Hickman era of the Fantastic Four.